two statements real fast here. And that is that, number one, whatever I say here is not totally guaranteed to be the thoughts of Lisa. Don't hold her responsible for what I say. Although she may agree with me a lot of the time, number one. And number two, she hasn't looked at this lecture yet, so she hasn't had a chance to edit it to make it good. But so we'll just carry on here. Okay, chronology. Remember, change through time. Well, this is time. So let's see what we have here. We won't do the whole thing. We'll just do some of it, I think. Evolution requires time. Bishop Ussher from North Ireland in the late 1600s did work on the Bible and tried to figure out generations and how many years per generation and so forth and so on, and figured out that the world was created at, I think it was 9 a.m. on the 24th of October, 4004 BC. How he got the exact time, day, month, I don't know, year I might give him, but the exact time, day, and month is
What was it, daylight savings time?
maybe it was daylight savings time in Northern Ireland. Could be. Could be. Pardon?
I'm not going to just don't have no running, don't want to participate.
Yeah. Well, to me it's sort of, but anyway. And he was a bishop, so like Father Mendel, maybe he had insights that the rest of us don't have. So it's a possibility. Well, how do we measure time? Time is kind of hard to measure. We talk about our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and if you're not LDS, you know who your great-great-grandparents are, or great-great-great-grandparents are. Well, you may or you may not, but that goes back a ways. And even if you know the names and dates, what was life like for them? And we don't know that much. At any rate, time is hard to measure. It's like temperature. How do you measure temperature? Well, finally somebody invented the thermometer. But before that, it was just, well, it's hot or it's cold, it's something in between. Well, we have two sets of mechanisms for dating things. One of them is called relative dating, and that does not mean incest. And that is able to answer the question, which is older than which? And the second is absolute dating methods, and in this we try to get an absolute date relatively. We can't get the month and the day, but we can guess the year plus or minus a certain amount depending on the accuracy of the measurement that we're using. So let's look at relative dating, and there are two that I'll talk about. First of all, stratigraphy, and the other is fluorine dating. Now, stratigraphy depends upon this uniformitarianism that we talked about before, that Hutton came up with and that Lyell popularized. And that essentially processes seen in the geological record are the same processes we see today. Therefore, we can explain the fossil record by what we know of today's processes. So if we find sandstone with ripples in it, and it looks like a beach, it probably was a beach, and so forth and so on. If we find igneous rock that looks a lot like lava when it cools down, it probably is lava that has cooled down. It cooled down a long time ago. Stratigraphy. This is the youngest, and this is the oldest. Does that make sense? Yes?
So does stratigraphy always hold that the higher stuff is younger?
Almost always. Sometimes you get redeposition. For instance, if this erodes down into here, then that's not the case. So you have to watch out for that. Maybe I'll take a photograph of my desk. On top of that stuff from the last few months here from about 1940. This was about 1869 when I first got here. That's still on my desk. I haven't looked at it yet. That's stratigraphy. We also have biostratigraphy, in the sense that at different layers, different organisms may be found. They're only there for a while. They evolve, they become extinct, or they evolve into something else. And so everything in that layer is gonna have a certain set of life forms, and then a higher level is gonna have a slightly different set of life forms. And we can essentially date stuff if we have the animal forms or the plant forms or the pollen that we have dated at one site, but we don't have dated at the other. But at the other site, we can say, well, it was dated at to a certain date at the other site. It has the same series of plants and or animals or pollen. So we're going to say this site over here is probably the same date. By the way, pollen is golden. It's almost indestructible. If you want to get a sample of pollen from rock, you put the rock in acid and the rock melts, but the pollen stays. It's tough. It's tough stuff. William Smith discovered this idea of faunal succession. So you have one set of animals at one level, an evolved set at the next. Some of the species may be gone because they became extinct, but there are new species, et cetera, et cetera. And we found that the same layers in England, you find the same set of animals, no matter where you go in England. Because they lived at the same time, they were deposited in the rock at the same time. And so it works something like this, so that you're unlikely to see trilobites living at the time of dinosaurs because they became extinct here. And the same for these creatures here. And we don't find dinosaurs down here because they hadn't evolved yet. And so we find these kind of creatures, we know we got something really old. If we find dinosaur bones, that's about that age. And if we find modern humans, we know that it's pretty recent, et cetera. And in between, we have other creatures that are wild markers. Use this in forensics. For instance, one of the cases I had was someone who was drowned in Flaming Gorge Reservoir. His wife wanted to collect the insurance, but he had just been found, but we had to identify him. And one of the ways we had to identify him was by two coins he had in his pocket, two pennies. One of them was 1978, and the other was 1984. So what dating would you give to this individual? Approximately when did he die? After 1984. That's right. He couldn't have died before 1984 because the coins hadn't come out yet. So we could date him that way. So that's coin stratigraphy or what? But anyway, we're able to date, and therefore, and actually he died in 1984. So his coin was up to date. His second coin was up to date, and the wife got the insurance, and that was it. Now we also reconstructed a face. We just had bone and fat for the adipocere. The fat remains on, the rest of the skin gets eaten away by microorganisms and so forth. We had the skin and the fat, so we could reconstruct the face pretty easily on him. Another case of biostratigraphy. If you're looking at this point in time, you'll have this set of organisms, but not those up there. And if you look at that point in time, you won't have any of these organisms down here. You'll have somebody else. You can date foraminifera, just tiny little creatures in the ocean, using the biostratigraphic method. Well, we can use bones, teeth, skin casts, pollen, plant residues, and cultural materials. For instance, after the Chicago fire of, 1878, 79, they just bulldozed Chicago into Lake Michigan and made Navy Pier out of it. So here we're going to Navy Pier, that's just the residue of the Chicago fire. Now, if we dug down into that residue that is now Navy Pier, what kinds of things would we expect to find? And what kinds of things would we not expect to find? Would we find any automobiles? No. Would we find carriages, horse bones, cow bones? We probably would, yeah. So, and we can look at, we can find pottery types, pottery that partially burned with the fire. That would be found there. Some pottery styles are just made for a certain length of time. And so you can date sites by pottery. Archaeologists do it all the time for traditional peoples. And we can do it for Chicago as well. We also wouldn't find electrical things, would we? Not yet. Let's think of one other kind of dating. It's fluorine dating. Fluorine dating is, fluorine is a naturally occurring element in the soil, but different soils have different amounts of fluorine in them. Fluorine dating is relative dating, but it is localized. Fluorine is absorbed into bones and other materials at a fairly constant rate given the location. And that depends on at least two things. Number one, the amount of fluorine in the soil, and number two, the weather conditions. Is it really dry? Is it really wet? Is it really cold? Is it really hot? Etc. And it takes a long time for the fluorine to leach into the bone. We cannot compare fluorine dates from one site to a distant site because the soils may have different amounts of fluorine. But at any one site, we can determine whether a bone is older than another bone by the amount of fluorine that is leached into the bone. So the longer the bone has been there, the more fluorine there is in the bone, or the tooth, or whatever. Our great embarrassment is, I might as well just come right out and say it. The greatest embarrassment is Piltdown. Piltdown was found, these skull fragments were found in a couple of different times within a 2 or 3 year time zone in southern England near the town of Piltdown. We didn't have good tests at the time. What happened was that experts looked at it. Actually, some experts said it was a fake. Others who had more prestige said, no, it's real. And then there was national pride. Germany had some good Neanderthal fossils. France had lots of good Neanderthal fossils. And England, this empire that stretched all around the world, had nothing. Now they had Piltdown. And so Piltdown became kind of a national treasure. And the bones were analyzed, they were put aside, and after 1912, I think it was, almost nobody got to see them until after World War II. And at that time, we had a couple of tools that we could use. The first was fluorine dating. The second was a nose. In order to do fluorine dating and carbon dating, which was just coming in at that time, they had to drill down into the bone. And when they drilled down into the jawbone, they could smell bone. Now, if something is really old, like 800,000 years old, you shouldn't smell bone when you drill into the bone. You should just smell rock. That was a real clue to start off with. And of course, this whole thing was just a humbug, as they say. It was put together from the Neolithic grid, the skull of a Neolithic grid, the jaw of an orangutan, the teeth of an orangutan, and all of it stained with a stain. The tools were stained, and we think we know who did it, a guy named Dawson. We now see that he had other fakes that he generated. He created Roman objects, for instance, he hated the establishment scientists because he was an amateur and he wanted to have some amount of pride. And so he faked all this stuff. And unfortunately, he came down with an attack of appendicitis and died. So he wasn't exposed until years after he had died. But there he was. And interestingly, one of his neighbors was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who got dragged into a little bit of this. There's a very interesting book written by Joe Viner about this. Viner was one of the scientists that investigated the Piltdown hoax, and he wrote up what had happened, what the sequence of events were, and who did it. Well, in the long run, we still don't know who did it. A few people know, like there's a Mexican scientist when he was Santiago Calves, got his PhD at Oxford. He says he knows, but he's not telling. I think he's dead by this thing. So he took the secret to the grave. So we're pretty sure Dawson did it. The question is, did he have help? Basic lesson of Piltdown is that we can screw up, but eventually science is self-correcting. You can fake it, but you can't fake it forever. And so there we have it. Absolute dating. Actually, is this enough for one day? We want some more. Why don't we call it off and have Lisa actually correct it, make it right. And we'll say this is good. We'll think of absolute dating next time. And go after that. Okay?